The sky that morning looked like it was holding back tears. A soft gray spread across the town, quiet but heavy, just like the woman walking down the cracked sidewalk with her little boy's hand clutched tightly in hers. Her name was Lena. Her denim jacket, worn at the elbows, was the only shield she had left against a world that had turned its back on her. The townspeople whispered when she passed. They didn't have to speak loudly. She had grown used to the way their eyes said everything. There goes the shameless woman. Before we go any further, if you believe that everyone deserves kindness, forgiveness, and a second chance in life, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Stories like Lena's deserve to be heard. It hadn't always been this way. Once, Lena's life was filled with laughter, warmth, and the soft chaos of a small but happy home. Her husband, Mark, worked long hours as a mechanic, and she stayed home with their son, Caleb. Their love wasn't perfect, but it was enough. That was before the accident, the night everything fell apart. Mark had been driving home after a late shift, too tired, too distracted. The rain was relentless. Lena remembered the phone call, the shattering silence that followed. He never made it home. She was left alone, with grief, bills, and a 4-year-old who still asked every night, "When's Daddy coming back?" At first, neighbors helped. There were casseroles, sympathy cards, kind words. But sympathy has an expiration date. Soon, the whispers started. She should move on. She's too young to stay alone forever. She's probably looking for another man already. The truth was simpler and sadder. Lena wasn't looking for love. She was looking for work. Rent was due, the electricity bill overdue, and Caleb's shoes had holes she couldn't ignore anymore. She applied everywhere, grocery stores, cleaning jobs, diners, but no one wanted to hire a woman who couldn't work nights, who needed to leave early to pick up her child. The town that once offered her comfort now looked at her like she was a burden. Then came the cafe. It was a small corner shop near the bus stop, with chipped tables and the smell of roasted coffee beans that clung to the walls. The owner, Mr. Harris, was gruff but fair. He offered her a job washing dishes and wiping tables. "It's minimum wage," he said, "but it's honest work." She took it without hesitation. Every morning she walked Caleb to school, kissed his forehead, and hurried to the cafe. Her hands grew rough from soap and hot water. Her back ached from bending, but she didn't complain. Every tip, every dollar mattered. But people noticed. Some of the regulars whispered cruelly, "She's working here now? How low she's fallen. She's always talking to that waiter. Shameless, isn't she?" They didn't see the truth, that Lena was fighting a quiet, unseen war every day. The waiter, Daniel, was kind. He was a few years younger, always smiling, always willing to help. When the cafe was empty, he'd share his leftover sandwich with her. When she had to rush to pick up Caleb, he'd finish wiping her tables so she could leave early. There was nothing romantic, just kindness between two people who understood what struggle felt like. But in a small town, kindness is often mistaken for scandal. The rumors spread. Mothers at Caleb's school stopped talking to her. Parents pulled their children away from him. One afternoon, Lena arrived at school to find Caleb sitting alone while the others played. His teacher smiled awkwardly. "He's been having trouble making friends lately." That night, Lena cried silently beside him, while he slept with his small hand clutching hers. As weeks passed, her exhaustion deepened. Bills piled up again. Mr. Harris cut her hours. And one evening, after closing, she found herself still sitting in the empty cafe, staring at her reflection in the window. Her hair was messy, her eyes hollow. The same reflection she once feared was now just familiar. Daniel noticed. "You okay?" he asked gently. She forced a smile. "I'm fine." But she wasn't. She waited there, long after the last customer left, until the lights dimmed and silence settled like dust. She felt invisible, forgotten. The whispers had turned her into a ghost in her own town. And then, Daniel took off his apron, pulled out a chair, and sat across from her. "You don't have to pretend," he said quietly. "You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to break." For the first time in months, Lena let herself cry. Not the quiet, hidden kind of tears, but deep shaking sobs that came from somewhere buried under years of holding it all together. Daniel didn't say anything. He just sat there, his presence soft and steady, while the rain tapped against the glass outside. The next morning, she woke up with swollen eyes but a lighter heart. Maybe, she thought, kindness could still exist, even if the world refused to see it that way. But the town didn't forgive easily. Someone saw her that night, a woman from across the street. By the next day, the story had grown twisted. Lena stayed late with a man at the cafe. They were alone. Shameless woman. The gossip reached Mr. Harris, who called her in with a tight jaw. "I can't have this kind of talk affecting my business," he said coldly. "You understand." She nodded, even as her throat burned. She packed her things and walked out, jobless once again. Caleb sensed the change. "Mommy, are we in trouble?" he asked one evening as she counted coins on the table. "No, baby," she said softly. "We're just figuring things out." But things got worse. Their landlord gave them notice. The fridge was nearly empty. Lena tried cleaning houses, doing laundry for neighbors, anything to keep them afloat. Still, no one wanted to help the shameless woman. It was Daniel who found her again, weeks later, sitting outside the grocery store with Caleb beside her, holding a small need work sign. He didn't pity her. He just knelt down and said, "Come with me." He had found a new job in the city, working at a restaurant, and there was an opening for a cleaner. "It's not much," he said, "but it's honest work. You'd get benefits, maybe even a fresh start." Lena hesitated. She looked back at the town that had once been her home, then at her son, whose small fingers clutched her sleeve. And for the first time, she chose to walk away from what hurt her instead of waiting for it to change. The city was loud, unfamiliar, but freeing. Lena worked long hours, but she was treated with respect. Caleb joined a new school, where kids didn't know anything about the woman with a bad name. Slowly, their lives began to piece together again. Every night, after putting Caleb to bed, Lena would stand by their small apartment window, watching the city lights flicker. She still carried scars, both visible and hidden, but now they reminded her of survival, not shame. Months passed, and one afternoon she returned to that same cafe, not as a worker, but as a customer. She ordered a coffee, sat near the window, and watched as people came and went. For once, she didn't care about who might be whispering. She had her dignity back, and no rumor could take that from her. When the waiter brought her coffee, he smiled and said, "You've come a long way." She smiled back. "Yes," she said softly. "I finally learned that being judged doesn't mean being wrong. Sometimes, surviving just looks different to people who've never had to try." If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stories like Lena's remind us that behind every whisper is a truth we may never understand. And before we end, tell us in the comments, have you ever seen someone judged unfairly for just trying to survive? Your words might give someone courage today.